Welcome back to Season 2 of Audio Oomox. You've got a season for each lobe. I'm Alex.
And I'm Brian.
And we are going to talk to you about the first 3 episodes. This is a special episode here that we're going to talk about the first 3 episodes of Season 2 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And if you're new to the podcast, I just invite you to check out the first season. We've got it all right there on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening to this podcast right now, most likely. And it'll catch you up on who we are and what we do. I'll just say this one quick thing. We're glad to be back after a brief hiatus of about a year, but don't let that scare you away. We're back. If you want more details on all of that stuff, previous episode, the Red Alert special for 2019, it's Red Alert 2019. Check that one out and it'll fill you in. But I don't want to waste a moment since we have 3 episodes to squeeze in here, do we, Brian?
Correct. Absolutely. The titles of the 3 episodes, we've got The Homecoming is the first one, followed by, what have we got?
The Circle?
The Circle and?
The Siege.
The Siege. So we'll dive right in. And you hinted at it. This is really the first kind of 3-part story arc in Trek history, which is kind of interesting. And it's really a harbinger, or it's a precursor of many other kind of longer, arcing, more in-depth stories and character development, where previous shows were much more standalone. There were some character development issues that came in and out over time, but this is one that's really setting a stage for some deeper stories and deeper analysis of characters and relationships.
You make such a great point, Brian, in that, the first 2-part episode of Star Trek was way back in the original series in the late 60s with The Menagerie, which relied upon a wraparound story with Captain Kirk that took the first pilot, The Cage, starring Jeffrey Hunter and Leonard Nimoy. They made a 2-parter out of that, a very dramatic and exciting and very interesting 2-parter, which incidentally, if you're a Star Trek Discovery fan, you know that recently we revisited Captain Pike and some other things involving that. And I'm not here to blow away spoilers on Discovery. I will say this, that Brian and I intend to do a special What We Think of Discovery episode down the road here, but that's not today. But you make a great point about how in all of this, Deep Space Nine, which started in 93, was one of the first Star Treks, well, beyond first Star Treks, one of the first series to actually have a continuity. Because you make a point already that most shows had some character development and might call back occasionally to some things that happened in previous episodes, but even The Next Generation initially started out, there wasn't a whole lot of continuity, right? In Deep Space Nine, who had, as a showrunner, or at least a serious writer involved, Ronald D. Moore, who went on to do a lot of heavy lifting with a lot of the Star Trek series that were out there. He also created the revitalized, the renewed, rebooted Battlestar Galactica, and he made that a complete saga. So it's interesting that you make that point that, Deep Space Nine was a pioneer, not just in science fiction, not just in Star Trek, but in television, to make the characters grow and have an arc. So I love that you said that, and I think the point here about the second season, I have some general observations about the season itself as we're getting ready to get into this. I think, and I'm echoing a lot of the things that the late Michael Piller, who was one of the co-creators with Rick Berman of Deep Space Nine, said, is that he really wanted to see Deep Space Nine become a character-driven show. And you can't have a character-driven show if your characters are resetting, rebooting every other episode. What I always hated was it's too strong a word, but when you think back to the original series, Captain Kirk, Edith Keeler, City on the Edge of Forever, he goes back in time to find Bones, and he falls in love with Joan Collins, for want of a easier way to explain this. And he goes through this immense heartbreak. Right. It's never mentioned again.
Right.
It's I mean, the guy, but then you move that forward to an analog to that, to The Next Generation, and here I am already jumping off track. I know I should keep going, but let me just say, you sparked this thing in me, man. Think about The Next Generation, the inner light, when they intercept a satellite, it beams into Picard's head that he's going to live this whole life.
Oh, right, yeah.
In like a matter of 25 minutes.
Probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite.
I know it is
episode.
Your favorite,
yeah.
I know it's your favorite. That's why I wanted to bring that through this, because you unknowingly sparked me into this. But when you think about that, though, Picard learned to play that flute, and he lived this whole life. You see the flute again later in the series. You see the effects of that on him later in the series. This is all direct line, but it was never really made like an episode to episode to episode thing until Star Trek Deep Space Nine started doing it. And you'll see that come to fruition in season 7. So that was my point.
Awesome.
So
great.
Character-driven stuff we're going to see in season 2.
Yes.
I think you're going to see a few things. I have some observations about characters. I think you're going to see Quark really become less dark and more of a lovable scamp who actually, the villain with the heart of gold type. He's not even really a villain, we find.
Right.
Bashir becomes less of a puppy dog chasing Dax and more of an action hero type. He's going to start becoming more. I was always found it interesting that Bashir in the overall arc of the show had no compunction, even though he was a healer, even though he was a doctor. He had no compunction whatsoever about picking up a phaser.
Right.
So you're going to see some of those things, and you're just going to see a lot of character growth here. And I think these 3 is probably the real launching pad for that. The first season, it was more about, hey, hi, it's us. We're Star Trek 2. I think they made a concerted effort from season 2, episode 1 on to divest themselves from the TNG comforts.
Right, absolutely. Yeah,
Do you think
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense because it's much more about characters that were maybe briefly introduced previously, or things like Bajorans appeared in The Next Generation, but they weren't an integral part. Cardassians, obviously, there were a couple of episodes there where there was some interaction with, especially Picard, with one of your favorite episodes, but now it kind of breaks away from that Starfleet interaction. It's much more about the interaction with the Bajoran people. It's much more interaction with the stuff in and around that outpost, and not. It doesn't fall back on trying to reconnect with Earth. Yeah,
because having Starfleet just like within like a couple of finger snaps to come rescue your ass doesn't sound very deep space to me.
Right.
You're there, and there's some interesting points in this particular 3 episodes where you begin to realize that there's really not a ton of Federation personnel on this ship, on this space station. They are basically, they look to the Bajorans. Cisco looks to the Bajoran security people and the Bajorans to run this station. He's got Federation people there, but not nearly enough. So I like that. I like the way they did it. Yeah. So folks listening in, which that would be you because you're hearing my voice, we used to kind of go through and cover a plot synopsis on each one of these we discussed. And we're happy to kind of give you the Cliff's Notes here, but we feel like you are a busy person, as are we, and not just because we're covering 3 episodes in this particular episode of Audio Oomox, but just because we think if you're listening, you probably listened or watched the show. So what we thought would be good, and if you're not doing this already, go ahead and press pause. We'll wait. Go watch these episodes and come back. But I just think, if you don't have time to watch them, you can go to, Memory Alpha or some of the websites and do that. But you don't really need to hear us go point by point through the plot. That said, what are the Cliff's Notes starting off here?
The first episode in this three-parter of the Homecoming is truly a homecoming. First, there's some fun stuff at the beginning where who was it? It was is it the Boslick freighter captain? Yeah. Quite attractive, I might add.
Yes.
Boslick, friend of Quark's, shows up and is dangling a little piece of jewelry, trying to get it to its rightful owner.
And incidentally, Quark does offer her a black hole. And just considering the way that scene was shot,
yes,
just saying,
there could be something going on there.
Could be, yeah. She's got the earring,
well, we don't know it at that time, but of
Lee Nollis.
Lee Nollis. Okay, yes, I was thinking Vangelis, but Lee Nollis. Of course, Kira is beside herself. Is like, I guess you can instantly recognize his earrings.
Well, no, they check. There's some dermal residue, so they run basically a DNA scan.
Okay, because I thought she just at the moment she saw it, she was like, "Oh yeah, of course."
No, there's some dermal residue. So basically, there's some old skin on it.
Right. So she finds out that it is him, and that they believe he is being held, and so next it is time for a mission to go save this guy, but it's got to be kind of under the radar.
Right.
I think at this point she's doing she's doing a little Bajoran yoga, which
she's either that or she's trying to wave in a Southwest jet down.
I was thinking it's relaxing for Bajorans to be held at gunpoint, and so she had her hands up. They've been occupied for so long. So, but she and Miles determine with a small that they're going to go under the radar, sneak in, and try and free this guy
and rescue Lee Nollis, who, by the way, we probably didn't mention is a hero of the Resistance. That's why it's a big deal. So
right, yeah, he's like this cult hero, and that will actually come up here in a little bit. But so they go in, they get with a little bit of resistance. They're able to free him and a group of people.
Yeah, and by the way, and I know we're not supposed to go point for point, but that was pretty dumb. But all right.
Yes. So
come on,
suspend disbelief.
Yeah, Miles walks up and he's like the human pimp of this Bajoran gal in the middle of this desert planet, Cardassia 4, and they drop the screen. Okay,
it happens all the time.
Sorry, I'm making the I'm making the dealer hands thing when they walk away from the table. I'm going to walk away from me arguing about how poor that part of the writing was. But go ahead.
Right, but they get off the planet and come back to this great homecoming. Now, that kind of leads into the Circle, because I can't recall whether it was the homecoming or the Circle where Lee Nollis confesses his hero story,
right,
and to Commander Sisko,
right, and there's like these symbols being spray painted all over of the Circle on these, which is like really spray paint. Okay,
so what's that stand for?
The Circle, which is like this resistance group within Bajor that's going to take over the government and those kinds of things. Yeah, so Lee Nollis, I think the idea is that he's kind of a man who shot Liberty Valance type character who they all believe he's this incredible leader and warrior, and in actuality he was just right place, wrong time, or wrong place, right time, and he survived, and he's not really this great hero, but
the stories kept getting larger and larger. And now he obviously feels like he doesn't deserve the accolades that have been foisted upon him. He doesn't feel he deserves any leadership role,
right.
And Commander Sisko, I think, convinces him otherwise, that his role is to save the Bajoran people, take that mantle, and use it for the betterment of Bajor.
Print the legend, that's the thing. The legend's more valuable than the truth.
Right. So now the thing that really, I started thinking, well, when did this episode come out? And it was in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
Putting it in perspective in global political space, that is when South Africa held their first post-apartheid free election.
Interesting.
And so there may have been some hints of Nelson Mandela, who spent all those years in prison, became a hero for sitting in prison. So he was not necessarily, at the time, more heroic than any other objector, but because he was, survived being put in a prison cell that he became elevated to that role, and then that year actually became president. So I think there may have been, whether intentionally or unintentionally, some parallels to that was currently going on at that time.
That could very well be. I hadn't thought of that at all. It's interesting because there's a character. There's Minister Jarrow, who was played by the incredible Frank Langella, who was playing opposite mostly Vedic Wynn, played by Oscar winner Louise Fletcher. But I mean, Frank Langella, multiple Tony winner, just a brilliant actor. And Lee Nall played by Richard Bamer, who you may have seen in the original West Side Story from way back when. Wow. Yeah, these are some quality actors here.
Right.
And you, if you're really paying attention and watching them work together, it's something else. So I'm getting to a point here with that, is that so you're seeing in Lee Nollis that he's kind of a Mandela type figure, although I ascribe greater intention from Mandela, who I'm going to go to prison, I'm going to make this work, whereas Lee Nollis was an accident. But I still see where you might be going with it. But then you have Minister Jarrow that Langella is playing, and we're getting ready to go into the next episode here. We're basically crossing over here, but we see that there is and Langella went uncredited, by the way, on this one. He did this because his kids love the show. He's completely uncredited. Did you not know that?
I didn't know that.
If you watch the credits, he's not in them. He's uncredited.
Wow.
He just did it. He said, I didn't do this to make money or to, get attention. My kids liked it, and I wanted them to see me in Star Trek. So I love Langella. He's a wonderful actor. And to see him play this character, and he's not like this mustache twirling villain that Vedic Wynn can be a little bit sometimes.
She can. I think when we get to the final episode, I think they both, We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
So we're in the circle now. So we're into episode 2. So these characters are introduced. They're starting. Frank Langella's character is now seeing an opportunity to seize on the uncertainty and unrest.
Right.
With the provisional government.
Right.
He's seeing an opportunity to take advantage of
unrest.
This opportunity. Yeah.
Well, he makes a great point. He makes a great point in there where he, in the circle, there's a lot that goes on in the circle. And like I said, we're not going point by point on what's going on here. So, again, if we're leaving you behind, we apologize. Watch the episode, check the Cliff's notes. But Jarrow and Vedic Wynn have come together, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, and I need to come back to a really great scene, by the way, that I'm jumping past, because this is part of the hazards of not going point by point in the synopsis. We're going to jump around a little bit, but we ended the first episode of the trilogy with Kira being reassigned and Lee Nollis becoming the Navarch and also the first officer of Deep Space Nine. Nobody's happy about that. They all like Lee just fine, but nobody wants Kira to go. So the second one opens up, and there's this funny Night at the Opera kind of scene where everybody comes into Kira's apartment on Deep Space Nine while she's packing.
Right.
And it's funny, and it's played really well by all 7 of the actors involved. So there's that great scene. But then she goes down to Bajor. Vedic Bareil is back. Some say Vedic Puerile. He's all right. He's just a little bland for my taste, but he's down
and a little creepy in this episode.
A little, yeah.
Just that he's a bit of a close talker.
He's very much a close talker, especially in the orb scene. But they're down there.
But I'm thinking he had a similar orb scene that is not viewed. So the same thing happened to him, where he's like standing naked behind her, checking out her lobes.
He's definitely checking, yes. But there's this bit where she gets kidnapped by the Circle. Mm-hmm. And the big reveal is, of course, Minister Jarrow is the Circle. Frank Langella is in charge of it. Right. And he has this scene where he's sitting on a rock above her. She's basically going to be tortured. And he makes this passionate case. He makes this passionate case for the Circle because he says basically that all that Bajor has with this great opportunity with this wormhole at their doorstep and all these things happening. The Cardassians have been driven off. They have this great opportunity, and all they have is this provisional government, which basically means a powerless government. And he makes this speech, and I ask you listeners, and I'm not making a correlation directly. It's between two personalities. It's not between two nations. So please don't at me, don't hate me. Mm-hmm. He reminded me so much of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when he go watch the way Bibi Netanyahu speaks and listen to Langela's speech. And there's no way these two they weren't in power. He wasn't in power.
Sure, right.
But I hear that and I just see Bibi Netanyahu, and he's like, because I've seen Netanyahu, he's like, everything that they do, fair or unfair with the Palestinians, and I'm not here to get into that stuff. But everything they do, he writes back to, Israel is virtuous, and Israel has these opportunities, and Israel is not going to be pushed around. And a lot of these things I agree with. But you could just watch that speech in the middle of the Circle episode 2. And just see if you don't notice a similarity there. And again, don't at me if you think I'm a hater on Israel. I'm not. But it's just, I'm here to make connections. And Brian, when you started making a connection with Lee Nahles and Mandela, I'm blown away because I did not do that. So I just thought I wanted to make sure we got to that point. But
interesting.
But the Circle is really not like super action packed this episode, but it's got a lot going on. It's very dense. And if you watch Langella and Vedic Wynn, Jaro and Wynn, their scenes, at first you could go, you could write them off, that's a little dry, okay, who cares, move on. But no, watch his face, watch the way it's done. Are they lovers, or are they just convenient partners because of what they're trying to do? Because Vedic Wynn clearly wants to be Kai.
Right.
She wants to be the Pope of Bajor,
right? They're seeing a very narrow opportunity, and so there's a great willingness to take a chance together. And for Kai Wynn, it's there's not as nearly as much risk on her part, because she can simply turn on him pretty easily.
Well, it's a story as old as time, and Wynn knows that Bareil is in her way to be Kai.
Yes,
it's in her interest to thwart anything Bareil wants, and that's why there's a scene with Wynn saying, "Oh, child, Major Kira, you're here at our abbey. Who invited you, and how long are you staying? Well, you can stay as long as you want, as long as it's less than a week." It's like, wow, you are a total jerk.
Yeah, Yeah, that's true. So the one other thing right there in that group of scenes is the orb viewing, and we kind of talked a little bit about it, but it was a premonition that was an orb of prophecy, and so Kira, Vedic Bareil, exposes Kira to this orb, and she has no idea that how much of this is wholly accurate and how much of it is symbolic of something in her future. But she's in a large group, a crowd. She can't understand what anyone is saying. Dax appears dressed as a Bajoran, so that could be that it's a familiar face with which the prophets will do on occasion, representing something, or it could be something else. The Vedic Bareil appears. Kira is naked, exposed in this prophecy or premonition, and as is Vedic Bareil, and they're laid naked in front of this crowd, and then it ends, and so she's left with a lot of confusion, and obviously doesn't want to tell Vedic Bareil, "Oh yeah, I was naked and you were standing behind me naked." So she kind of leaves that part out, but is really now, because of how confusing and how sensitive the premonition or the prophecy was, she's left to not be able to have any help interpreting it, because she's I think afraid to expose all those things.
Right.
But there's a little clue that maybe Vedic Bareil had seen the same premonition, because he really was asking a lot of probing questions of her. So he may have he may have seen something similar. That's what I was led to believe. So
that's great. I like that. You're right. I think so. And it goes right into the siege, where basically the Federation's like, you guys got to get off the ship or get off the Deep Space Nine.
Yep. They threw the Prime Directive card out, and it's like,
yeah. And Sisko is like one of the few Federation captains who actually was like, okay, you're right, I'll follow your orders, kind of. And they decide they're gonna stay behind, and they're gonna become freedom fighters on their own station,
right?
And you're seeing the Resistance. Lee Nahlas is going to join with Sisko and crew while Kira's going to figure this out on Bajor.
Right.
General Krim and Colonel Day are heading towards DS9.
So Colonel Day, that's
Steven Weber from Wings.
From Wings, yeah. Okay. I knew I recognized that one.
Yeah, with his
and he was really on the upside of his career. He was getting a lot of play. So
interesting.
Anyway,
that he took this little part, isn't it? And to put on the purple booties of the Bajoran militia, but I hate the booty thing. And Odo is always wearing the booties. It's the pants tucked into these boots. I don't care for it. But he's there now. Stephen Macht plays Krem of the Bajoran militia. Stephen Macht, the actor, though, guess what he was up for? This is a little bit of trivia for you. He was one of the finalists. Him and Edward James Olmos Castillo, or Admiral Adama from. Current Commander Adama and Admiral whatever from the new Battlestar Galactica, they were up from Picard.
Oh, really?
Yes, they were both beaten out by a young bald man named Patrick Stewart before he was even a Sir. And but Stephen Macht, can you imagine if you just look at General Krim, which you're probably thinking, wait, I'm trying to remember General Krim in this episode. It was some genuine Krim. Anyway, if you see him in the episode, he was up for the role. I thought he did fine with what he had too, but he was playing Krim as kind of like an Eisenhower type. He's like, I'm a general. My job is to be a general, and I'm going to do right and whatever the policy is. But I'm an honorable man as well, and all that. So you see that. I know we promised we'd keep this succinct, but it was a little ambitious. We got 3 episodes here, don't you think?
Absolutely. And so we're diving in, and so we break it into 2 instead of 3. We're still. That's still an efficiency improvement.
Yeah, we're ahead of the game. We'll see you next time. And as we always say,
the docking ring is closed. Subspace radio is a tricky thing out here in deep space.
Which is why we hope you'll stay up to date on Facebook at facebook.com/audio Oomox, spelled AUDIOOOMOX.
That's a lot of O's.